Yo, 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 everybody, what's going on? Welcome to episode 64 of Climbing the Ladder. I'm your host, ChanmanV. Yes, we're finally starting the show. The other time was the whole pre-show and stuff, but, we're definitely happy to be part of Dota 2 history and all that good stuff. But we're going to be doing our first Dota 2 episode today, and we're going to be talking to all, obviously these two guys, the Beyond the Summit fellas, and then we're going to be talking about the International 3, and then also a little bit about the whole WCS and International kind of overlapping each other. But we'll start off the show talking a lot about just the Beyond the Summit and the studio and finding out a lot of what these guys are doing. But let me get into it. Let's introduce everybody. John Clark here, my co-host each and every week. What up, John?
Not much. How are you?
Good. And the two Daves, GoDz and LD.
Hi, I'm LD, in case there's any confusion.
Well, they can kind of see that.
We were fighting over who gets to be the original David.
Yeah, so we're just talking. So let's work this out. So how are we going to do this? Am I going to call you guys LD and GoDz, or is there going to be one of you going to be
David and David?
David and David. David P, David G.
I can go with that.
David P and David G?
Yeah, see, that I was always pushing him in that direction, but... My God. See,
I also go by last name.
He just wants to be called the GoDz. I mean,
well, I'm already confused, so it doesn't matter to me. I'm just gonna
go with the flow.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go with. Gosh, I don't know. How we're gonna do this. We'll just go with GoDz and LD. It'll be easiest. Otherwise, we're gonna be like David G and David P. They don't sound that different either. So.
Somebody's saying that we're StarCraft people.
We're StarCraft people.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a StarCraft person.
You are.
Definitely.
But then nobody in here probably knows me anyway.
But Climbing the Ladder, guys, I know everybody thinks Climbing the Ladder is just a StarCraft show. It's actually an esports show, all right? So that's why we're doing a Dota 2 show today. But, yeah, so let's start off. How about that game, LD? I mean, I seriously didn't think it was going to end.
Did you guys actually watch it, or did you just hear about it?
We were watching it. We were doing a pre-show. We were literally... Like, they could see us, the three of us, for a little bit, because we were just kind of watching and figured it'd be better than sitting there.
So apparently it was the longest Dota game, as far as competitive games go, on record. There's been some pub games that lasted, I think the longest was 200 minutes, something ridiculous. That's the thing. I guess that's one difference between Dota and StarCraft, though, for those of you who are StarCraft fans, is sometimes Dota games are really long, and actually in general I'd say they're much longer. Like a lot of StarCraft games are 10, 15, 20 minutes, but at most. But
20 minutes probably average.
Mm-hmm. A long Dota game, easily an hour. So 96 minutes and change, I think, was the final time.
Yeah.
You go through a lot of emotions in a game like that. You have your highs, you have your lows, and when it's all said and done, at least if you're like me, you get your little kooky. So you kind of pull yourself back as a human being.
It's one of those games where you need a highlight clip. You need a lot of editing where you put in all the highs together and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the good and the bad thing about a long game like that is Lumi and myself both have terrible, corny senses of humor. So if it goes 96 minutes, you get to see the full spectrum of terrible and corny.
Oh, God, whatever.
Then some Dota action to break it up.
But okay, let's jump into some topics. Start off with Beyond the Summit and just the things that you guys are working on. Why don't you give us just a quick update on the current state of Beyond the Summit and some of the events you guys are producing or maybe have planned and casting and that sort of bit.
Yeah, right now we're just focusing on online content. We actually just wrapped up the Alienware Cup, which we almost reached 100,000 concurrent viewers just on the English stream for the grand finals, which is the Navi versus LGD best of 5. So we've had just a fantastic time producing events from our new studio, which we funded with the Kickstarter. We've just been covering tournaments here and there. We're doing the Corsair Gaming Summer Tournament right now, which is what LD just finished, and looking just sort of to wrap up a few turns before TI3, which is really what everyone in the Dota 2 scene cares about right now.
Yeah, as far as content goes, I would say we do collectively, not just... so with Beyond the Summit, there's the studio teams. There's myself, there's GoDz, there's Luminous, and then there's other casters that we bring in, I guess you could say, as hired talent, like Purge, Blitz, Merlini. If you're a Dota player or viewer, you're probably familiar with these names. If not, just they're casters and personalities. So there's our studio team, and then we have sort of community casters and friends and just colleagues who work for us on sort of a because you could say an independent contractor basis, so they'll stream other events. So if you add all that up, I would say collectively we're doing probably the highest volume of content, maybe outside of Join Dota, who does quite a bit as well. So there's stuff like the Red Bull ECL, which was a big Chinese LAN tournament. We covered the LAN finals the last 2 days from the studio, but Shiver helped out a lot with the group stage coverage. We've been through, over the past year, I guess the G1 League Season 4 and 5, the G League Season 2. So primarily the focus is on Asian Dota, and specifically it was Southeast Asian Dota. As of late, it's been more Chinese Dota, mostly because that's where the big money is and where the big tournaments that people are interested in watching is. But I would say we have a pretty wide variety, like from sort of the lower tier content, sort of the up-and-coming amateur teams, or the recently minted professional teams that are trying to make a big name for themselves, all the way up to the top teams like Navi and LGD. I mean LGD and Navi, because Navi beat them, right?
Oh, here we go.
Navi are the top dogs before anyone in the chat flames me.
Exactly. No, that's really cool.
We've had it's a wide variety, a smorgasbord, I guess you could say, of Dota.
Yeah, and I mean, it's Dota's in that kind of state where you're able to do that, right? Just every level of Dota that you're able to just produce some type of produce an event for, right? Because right now in League and right now in StarCraft 2, it's just all the top level, right? There's nothing right now for any kind of grassroots. There's no place for grassroots, right? Especially for any studio or anything like that to really be doing some high level productions for, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least from my experience watching League and StarCraft, obviously there is the amateur level of competition. It's more just there's so much premier content that it's 24/7. So unless you have a vested interest in watching those games or you like a certain caster, then you just people don't watch it. But obviously there is some level of amateur competition going on.
Yeah, well, definitely. But
wish there was a lot more.
Yeah, John's all about the amateur and the amateur scene. So
yeah, I definitely am too. I mean, I came from a Counter-Strike 1.6 background. I started playing as a freshman in high school, which was around 2000, and I played on and off for the next 8 to 10 years. And in Counter-Strike, at least in North America, there was CAL, Cyber Athlete League,
right?
Yep.
Which, well, Angel Munoz is not a very nice guy and has done a lot of horrible things for esports. But the league was awesome, and what it did really well was it had a set of tiers, right? So you started with Cal Open, then you had Cal Intermediate, Main, Premier, and eventually Invite. I think eventually Invite sort of stopped because all the pro teams just played offline tournaments. But I think that was one thing that 1.6 did well, and is one thing that I personally invested in a lot, is finding a way to build this structure for teams to sort of grow and see their improvement. It's a bit lacking in Dota. There are some in-house leagues, but as far as one overarching league that also gives teams opportunities to advance, there aren't many. I think the closest right now is StarLadder, but StarLadder is primarily for European teams. You don't really see any North American teams there as of late, and even then, it's not really that well developed in terms of how they promote it or the amount of broadcast coverage they give it. But there is a system in place, at least for people to improve.
Chris, why didn't you introduce me to these guys before? I mean, what he just said is so right on, especially in trying to explain to people what Cal was and why people enjoyed playing with it, in it, even at the lowest levels, was because of that whole tiered system. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, you could really see your progress, which, I mean, you look at Dota 2 right now, and that's actually, I think that's one of the bigger issues for people who want a quantitative way to measure your skill. League has ELO, and rank play, which obviously comes with its own host of problems, and ultimately, how much can you really rank an individual in a team game? That's a separate issue, I guess, but at least they have ELO, which I think is one thing for the people who care about measuring their improvement. There's some way to see it, but, even then, I mean, there's not your one-stop shop, and there's still not in Dota, and I don't know if there ever will be, because there's so many leagues. Everyone wants to do their own thing. Sure, some of the premier leagues will sort of rise to the top, and if Navi and LGD are playing in one league, another league that doesn't have those kinds of teams probably won't get the viewers. But as far as will there be one place to go for people who just want to play competitively and then sort of evaluate themselves, see how they grow, and get to play against the best teams? I mean, right now you just have to sort of do it the hard way, right? You start off as an unknown team, you beg for scrims with top teams, you grind it out, you play a lot of matchmaking to try and make connections and make friends, and eventually, if you're lucky, you get your break.
Well, do you guys see Valve pulling a Riot and Blizzard, and creating some crazy championship series, and really having they already have a hand in all of the the esports side of Dota 2, but do you see them taking a crazy, just a huge step forward and taking control of all of esports basically for Dota 2? What do you think, GoDz?
I don't think they have any plans to do so. I think with the way they've set it up so that they have the international each year is what they're perfectly satisfied with. I think even the fact they have to have a qualifier for the East and Western scene each year is something which they prefer not to have. It's more a sort of a necessity because it's impossible to decide which 16 teams you directly invite. I think if it was possible, they would have it be entirely invite, but for them, they want this once-a-year tournament, which is the big thing, which sort of is the driving focus. People say like the Super Bowl for Dota 2 or for esports, whatever it may be. But yeah, I think if it was up to Valve, like this is the one thing they want to have. They don't want to have the same kind of involvement that Riot has with League of Legends, that Blizzard has with WCS and StarCraft 2. For them, they want to have a scene that's sustainable on its own and doesn't need the developer support. They want to offer tools which help the tournament organizations, which is what they do with the Dota 2 workshop, the store there where tournaments have Dota TV tickets, can get revenue through Dota TV. They can get revenue through making their own sort of in-game content like couriers and other items. And that's sort of more where Valve was kind of trying to connect sort of the organizers with these tools, which they can sort of use to make more revenue through their consumers, through their products. So I think Valve would rather it's the scene itself, which is making these tournaments. Because I think, if there's anything to be learned from WCS and what Blizzard have done, it's that these tournament organizers know probably more than the game developers do about how to run tournaments.
Not probably, they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, yeah, this will be interesting to see, and I think I agree with you guys. From what I've heard too, is that Valve will not pull one of those moves. But the biggest thing, at least for StarCraft and League of Legends, that a lot of people have kind of the argument they've made for it being good is that we actually have somebody that has obviously a lot of funds to back it. Not to mention they actually have interest in making this successful. Take a big role in it. So it'll be interesting to see if Dota, just the approach that Dota will be taking with this, because I know John and I agree that having a publisher be in charge of the esports side of things isn't the most ideal situation for a game. And there goes GoDz.
We've lost him. His connection back in Australia
is gone. No, man.
Yeah, God is dead.
God is dead, right?
It's kind of interesting with Valve though, because like God said, their idea is that the scene grows organically, right? So they create tools like Dota TV, the tickets, the Steam store items. They've added these upgrade system, like all these different ways for you to basically make money off of tournaments, so you can make a sustainable business. But at the same time, the international is so freaking big that if you add up every other Dota 2 tournament, at least for now, they don't really stack up. So even though Valve's kind of has this interesting dilemma where they want to make the international as amazing as possible, ultimately it's probably the best esports marketing tool ever created. But at the same time, if you make it too big, then that's all teams care about. And you sort of see it now where teams they won't make roster changes until after the event, and immediately after the event's over, everyone disbands and reforms. So not everyone, but most of the teams. So it still has that effect to some extent, but at least it's once a year instead of year-round. So there is room for other organizers to get involved.
Yeah, well, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned about the disbanding, and that's always going to happen. But the whole idea of what Cal was and what it appears that Valve is doing and letting the community build on its own is that maybe what will happen, what you can hope happens, that the community will find a way to make it so it's not always like that. So there is some sort of build up to the international that keeps teams together and then keeps them together after that. And that's where the community can make a difference, as opposed to Valve trying to dictate all of that, and just let them run the international, which they do very, it's done very well, and it's huge. It's one time a year. That's the way it should be.
Well, it's funny because there's only one international every year, and everybody calls it the Super Bowl because it only happens once, right? And that's kind of the thing where the other sports have too, where there's just one championship every year, and it just kind of culminates into that, right? Right now with the international, I mean, there's not much of a storyline leading up to it, right? It's just that, once you qualify for it, then that's it. It's just one tournament that just happens to be enormously huge.
I think there's actually a lot of storyline, but I think what you're getting at is there's not like a formal structure that feeds teams into the event. Like, you don't have a bunch of qualifiers and everyone has their like direct path of getting there. But at the same time, you go into the event and there's a lot of storylines as far as, teams that are on the rise, teams that have had roster issues, teams that, had struggled in the qualifier and then managed to make their way, and teams that fell short, arguments about who should have been invited or not. I mean, there's certainly a lot of drama there because most of the teams that get into the event are invited. But even in the months leading up to the invites, there's, a lot of debate and questioning both within Valve as well as just within the community at large about, which teams are the most deserving to be here, which teams belong at this event. And then when you go into the event, it's which teams are performing well now, heading into the event. Have they had good results recently? What's their past track record?
Yeah.
Does this team do good on LAN in general? Is this a championship team? So I think there are a lot of storylines, but it's not like one overarching structure. So it's maybe a little bit harder to follow in that sense. I don't know. I don't even know how many European tournaments there's been, but as far as major events, I'd wager like easily, I don't know, what would you say, GoDz? Like 30 to 40 since the beginning of the year, maybe? Maybe not that much, but a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely
as far as major events, like 10 plus at least.
Yeah, definitely.
So you guys, GoDz, like you guys as as studio owners now, right, and producers and casters now, would you rather see Dota 2 end up being more, from the structure of just a bunch of one-off tournaments every single week, and maybe you guys are involved in a lot of those, or would you rather have this this weekly production, like this league type of structure where you have constant content to produce and for the Dota 2 community?
I think it's hard. I think having this one sort of, I guess, LCS or WCS type league is great for the scene. I just don't see it happening in Dota 2, at least not for a year or two. I think the way it's going to remain is that there is enough teams will be playing in 3-4 tournaments at a time. They're going to be juggling different commitments. As a studio owner now, I think for us, we'd prefer that it stay the way it is, just because we look to cover as much as we can. We also believe that by having lots of different tournaments, it gives more space and room for upcoming teams to shine, and that's something which we find kind of important. We want to kind of give opportunities for these new teams to sort of make a name for themselves and sort of get in the spotlight. But when you have this format where you're either in the premier tournament or you're not, then you've either made or you haven't. It's a lot harder to have those ways of getting exposure as a new upcoming team. So I think with the large number of tournaments going on and with the way that Beyond the Summit operates, how we have our studio casters, then we also have our external casters who help cover some other tournaments remotely, it gives a lot more opportunities for teams in general. So I think it's better, at least currently, for the scene as a whole, at least for the semi-professional scene, for the amateur scene. I think having that one big tournament is just it only really benefits the top 10 or so teams.
Right. I mean, with that being said, ultimately, I think the scene will start to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. Like, over time, I imagine, especially for the Premier Leagues, you're going to see the tournaments that have the bigger prize money, they treat the teams better, they have the right connections to get those big teams interested in the tournament, wanting to play. You get the top casters. Like, if you put enough of the ingredients for a successful tournament together, ultimately other tournaments can't compete, right? Because let's say, I don't know, you look at StarCraft, some tournament has Innovation and a bunch of the other top Koreans, then Grubby and some really interesting Westerners. That tournament is going to be more successful than something that has, the less interesting players. So I don't think it will happen from the top down. Like GoDz said, Valve is not going to create some overarching, we control basically all the premier Dota content, but I think organically it's starting to go that direction. You're seeing a lot more LAN tournaments, you're seeing just a lot more structure in general, and I wouldn't say it's a completely open competitive scene because ultimately everyone's competing with Valve to some extent as far as TI3 goes. Not directly, but just indirectly in terms of making teams care about their events when there's this $2.6 million tournament. But outside of that, it's mostly free competition. And ultimately, if you do a better job as an organizer, as a broadcaster, and you do a good job of promoting that and explaining it to people, then you should rise to the top.
Yeah, I mean, just because it's not a publisher doesn't mean that the same thing cannot won't happen. I mean, it could just be another huge organization that has a ton of money and that tries to accomplish the same thing. But Valve has the last say in the end, right? Being the publisher. But,
Yeah, they take a pretty hands-off approach.
yeah, they do. They do.
I've actually yet to hear of them rejecting a tournament. I've never heard of them trying to shut anything down. Now, sometimes they won't give a tournament a ticket, but that's usually just as far as at least from my experience. If you try to contact them too last minute, you haven't gone through the paperwork. If it's a really small amateur thing, maybe then. But pretty much any event that you can think of can get a Dota TV ticket, can have a courier bundled or other items bundled if they do it far enough in advance. So I think Valve overall is mostly permissive, and then it's just up to organizers and as well as broadcasters to differentiate themselves from the competition.
Right. Okay.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't we talk about the studio? Kind of switch over because again, I kind of want to get this talk in before John has to go here. So there was been questions like over months, just about the studio. I think a lot of them have been answered now that you guys are doing content from the studio and that sort of thing. But I kind of wanted to hear some specifics about it and maybe get you guys to talk a little bit about the business side of it. So the studio obviously started with the whole Indiegogo campaign, and it went really well. First day, I mean, you guys raised I think $25,000 on the first day, right? Here's the Indiegogo page from a long time ago, and it looks like you guys raised $39,000 total. So from just the $39,000, have you guys gone through it all, like in terms of the studio, or are you guys still waiting to spend some of that?
We haven't gone through, I would say, not all of it yet. We've invested most of it into what is the equipment that's now at the studio, which is all the production equipment, the casting desk, the analyst desk. The rest of it, we're kind of looking to find what's going to be the best way to grow the studio, to find a better location as well as another big thing for us, so we can have more space, bring in more people, and just sort of look to expand on what we've already got. I guess the main plans from there is just going to be figuring out to make everything sort of you can see LD, he doesn't have a closet right now. The actual circumstances, we don't even have a proper production desk. We just have a little plastic table with like 6 monitors on it that Jared, our producer, tries to juggle around and manage.
Man,
somehow.
you're like pulling the curtains around.
we're ruining the magic bit, but
Exactly.
there's a lot of different things we can do just to improve the actual appearance and functionality of the studio, which is where a lot of that's going to go. But I think the hardest thing, which is where we got a lot of criticism, which was that we did the Kickstarter at the same time, even after the Kickstarter was done, we were still casting Dota 2. We were casting 50, 60 hours of content a week. So actually getting the studio up and running took longer than some people expected, because we still had to cast. That was like before we had the studio, our business model was that we casted games. It was based on ad revenue from Twitch TV, YouTube, whatever it was. So now that the studio is up, we want to sort of try and make something a bit more sustainable outside of ad revenue as well, and hopefully make something which the community can be happy with.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has to remember that you guys didn't live in none of you guys lived in LA, so you guys were actually just coming together in LA, and obviously, God, you're in Melbourne, right? So it's it's pretty crazy. And actually, you want to just answer the question now? Like, some of the people were wondering where you've been and why you haven't been casting lately.
I'm in Melbourne at the moment. I was just in the US on a 3-month visa waiver program, so I'm actually looking to get a full-time US visa. I have a visa appointment in a couple of days. Hopefully everything goes all right. But basically, while in Australia, I can't really be commentating much. The internet here is pretty shocking, and I don't have proper to really be commentating with. So I'll be back in the US for the International 3, and then after that, I'll return to our studio in LA.
All right, good stuff. John, I know you wanted to ask some stuff about the Indiegogo, so why don't you...
Well, the first question really, if you guys have paid attention to, other areas in esports and people that have done these crowdsourcing type things, what was your initial thoughts going into it? Were you worried about any sort of backlash?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for myself, not for GoDz, but I was concerned that people would view us as money grubbing, as not in it for the love of the game. Obviously, when you do something like a Kickstarter or anything that involves crowdsourcing, there's a lot of pressure and expectations that come with it. It's like, oh, people gave you money to do what you do, and then even people who didn't contribute but know that other people in the community did, just as members of that community, feel like a certain level of involvement and I say entitlement not in a negative way, but like they're entitled to a certain quality of product. They expect, to deliver on your expectation or on their expectations. And there was some, at least from me, there was some resistance and reluctance to do it because obviously if we screwed it up and did it really poorly, it could just torpedo what had been a pretty successful grassroots movement. I mean, I started casting last January. Around June, I found out I'd be casting at the International 2. I'd barely been casting for years. My first live event, and it was $1.6 million worth of live event. Ended up going pretty well. I was still a pretty small-time caster even after that. GoDz and I started working closely together. But we went from... Dota's grown a lot, so it's not just that we've grown, but our brand has grown a lot as well. I guess if you look a year back, it was pretty much just joined Dota as sort of the go-to place for English commentary. Toby was the most well-known caster by far. There was Purge, and there was GoDz, and there was Luminous as sort of your other well-known casters, but we had grown a lot, and so, yeah, it was obviously a big risk to take. We had a lot of goodwill at the time. People were looking to us as something new and fresh, and generally, people want to see change, so they were pretty happy with what we were doing. And
there is another co-host of this show who hates the idea of crowdsourcing.
I saw there was someone posting about it on Reddit today, actually. Yes,
Richard Lewis. And I really got it. The one time I really was hoping he'd be on this because I actually am all for it. And I think what you guys did was great. And you're not asking for anything different than, donations or stream revenue, to be honest with you. I mean, you're going to end up working for this. And if you don't, you'll be out of a job and you'll be out of the Dota 2 community because they'll let you know. And I think what you guys did, I think it was a bold move. Especially with what some of the other crowdsourcing type things that have happened, but I think you guys handled it well. It was a very interesting video, by the way.
You should have seen some of the earlier drafts. They were abysmal.
We were so happy with the final product of it, though.
Yeah, we had by the way, we had a lot of help from Hotbid, so he didn't actually tell us.
Oh God, no wonder.
But he saw some of the initial drafts, and he was like, "Yeah, you shouldn't do that." I think we still would have had a lot of success, but not because of the video, simply because people enjoyed what we did and wanted to help us out.
Yeah.
But the final video,
I think that's that's really the big thing to emphasize, like how many people have helped us. I mean, I think the biggest name to mention is actually the GoDz studio. They've given us so much advice as far as the production, and even some ways, I mean, not so much as almost being something directly modeling ourselves after them. I think we do something very different to them as far as how our shows are done, but as far as the actual studio stuff, we took a lot from them and they've actually helped us so much. So like we owe a lot to them as far as learning from them.
I mean, they definitely didn't have to. I mean, they could have said, figure it out yourselves.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, one of the questions that that I have with this though, and I just have to be brutally honest, is what sort of possible revenue can you make from this in order to, I guess, sustain the sort of money that it's going to take to continue to put into this?
Right now, we're actually doing quite well. We can walk through some of the revenue sources, I guess. There's Twitch ad revenue, which until today has been by far our biggest revenue source in general. There's YouTube ad revenue, which started off really small because our YouTube channel I think we only formed it like December, but it's grown from 0 to like 50,000 subs. So nice. YouTube ad revenue is pretty sustainable because with YouTube, you have your VOD library. So even when you're not making new content, people still go back and watch old VODs, watch old funny videos. It's sort of a more sustainable source of revenue than Twitch, which I'd say like 99% of the Twitch revenue is for live stream. Sure, you get a little bit for rebroadcasts, a little bit for VODs.
Aren't there VODs on Twitch too?
Yeah, trust me, people are not watching those, especially not there's YouTube VODs. That's beyond that, there's sponsorships. I think that's the one area that we haven't had that many connections, and a lot of sponsorships is, first of all, being a good salesman and having something good to sell, and then secondly, knowing who to sell it to. And for a while, the other issue is that we've been so busy working in the studio, creating content, that we've been somewhat, I would say, negligent in that area. We haven't really done as good of a job of finding sponsors and securing them as we could, but it's something we'll be focusing on a lot more after the International 3, whether it means bringing someone else in to help us sell them, whether it means finding other people to commentate more so that we can focus on the business side of the things. I think it's the biggest sort of revenue source that we haven't really developed. We do have some partnerships with iBuyPower. We've had a fairly small one as sort of a, let's feel each other out and see if we want to work together more in the future. Twitch has supported us a bit, but moving forward, I think that's the one area it's sort of your established and default esports revenue is sponsorships, whether it's teams or tournaments. That's something we can work on. And the other thing, I think the other big one is, well, there's Twitch subs, but I'll sort of tie that in with ad revenue. It's a small recurring thing for people who want to help us. But the other big one is Steam store revenue. So we just released a courier, the Elgato courier. That was my old cat. Her name was Elgato back when I lived in Philly. It's actually done quite well. The last I had heard, it had sold about, I think, like 5,000, you said, GoDz, so it was a few weeks ago.
Wow, that's pretty good. How much does it go for?
The courier sells for $12. Valve takes 25% of all workshop items, and then we split with the creator as well. So
we get a bit less than $1. I mean, we get a bit less than $1 per courier. I mean, we're pretty open about that kind of stuff. So I mean, we make
that's still really cool. You know,
you can piece it together.
Yeah, that's like an actual revenue stream that doesn't require that's based on something you're doing as opposed to a partnership or a sponsorship from someone.
Yeah.
I'm reading this chat, getting confused. But
I know, right?
I think that's the thing I like about the Steam Workshop and stuff like subscriptions, whatever it may be. It's no longer donations. They're actually getting a product or something. You're getting this this Dota 2 Korean game, or you're getting the Twitch subscriptions. I mean, so some people may feel like a donation, but you actually get a lot out of that. I mean, we're planning to do more with the subscriptions moving forward. You get your ad-free viewing, of course. You get your emoticons. So I think it really is sort of this. We want to be selling people a product, not continuing to ask for donations, which was more what the Kickstarter was.
And I do want to say one thing before I forget, because it just occurred to me earlier as far as the Kickstarter went. I still to this day, and I'm sure GoDz feels the same way, because we've actually talked about it. If anybody did contribute to us and feels like they didn't get what they expected, whether it was the studio or the actual donation, that person can contact us. I have no problem refunding that money to people. It was not that we don't appreciate it. It's meant a lot to us. It helped us get jump started. But it's something where we wanted to do it to connect with people directly who wanted to support us. And if they're not happy with what we're delivering, they didn't get what they expected, they can honestly have their money back, because I don't want anyone to feel like they were cheated. And I'm sure GoDz pretty much feels the same way. But I will say, pretty much everyone who's contributed, we've been a little bit slow fulfilling some of the rewards, but most people are just happy that they're getting a much higher level of production. You know, casters in studio with camera shots. We have a much better overlay system now. We do more video content. We have a dedicated producer. We're covering more content in general. So I think for a lot of people, the rewards were kind of secondary, but to this day, I still feel like if people aren't happy with what they got, then I'm happy to give them their money back. But we want it to be something where people feel good about it.
We're waiting for this, dude. We're waiting for Song of the Siren. Like, has that happened yet? I mean,
I think that's what most people are disappointed in.
Yeah.
Have you guys gone through
on this?
I mean, have you guys gone through these things? Or is this what you're talking about?
That's one thing which, I mean, we'll be completely open about. We've failed our promise as far as what the deadlines were that were posted on the Indiegogo. We have some of the deadlines we haven't met, honestly speaking. We will go through and do everything. It's just a matter of we were a bit ambitious as far as some of the timelines. So we haven't delivered on all of them. We've got all of the T-shirts sent out. We've started going through a lot of the other work with the shout outs, with some just sort of organizing the lessons and stuff that we promised as well. But there's still quite a few things to actually finish on that.
Okay, but you guys are definitely going to fulfill all these things for sure.
Yeah, we will.
That's the point. I mean, I gotta ask that question. Okay, it's like
we are, and the other issue is it's not malicious, it's not lazy or anything like that. It's honestly, we've taken on so much content in order to make the business successful, try and build sustainable revenue streams, and just grow our brand that. We physically have sometimes not had time. Like I might cast for 10 hours a day, then go do YouTube VODs, work on future tournaments that are upcoming. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily leave time to do stuff like, give somebody a lesson. And that's not to say that we shouldn't have made the time for it, but more just, we're not sitting back and, taking a swim and, going for a bike ride and, cruising to Cabo. We are working on Beyond the Summit. So I guess I hope in that sense, at least people realize it's time spent on the project they wanted to support.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I'm sure the majority of people understand that and see that. That's the thing about the BTS studios, that we actually get to see what you guys do every day. It's not, maybe for a little while when you guys were getting set up, there was, a little bit of, I mean, there wasn't very much transparency during that time, but now it's like, we get to see everything. We get to see the product of all of this. So I did have a question. So the genesis of this idea of the studio, did it come from the GD studio guys, or did it have some of the input, or just maybe some of the information of how much it really does take to get a studio started come from them? Because the reason I bring it up is because James was on Richard's show Esports Heaven last week or 2 weeks ago, and he mentioned just, I think they were talking from in the standpoint of Twitch and maybe some of the things Twitch could do, and they mentioned just the whole ramp up for or start up for a studio, and they brought you guys up. He brought you guys up. So I just want to ask you guys: did the idea come from them or no?
The idea of the studio, no.
Okay.
I don't think the idea came from them, but I think the fact that we definitely, LD and I talked about it. It was after TI2 we started talking about it. I think it was more the reality that we could actually do it came from them, because we saw what they were doing and like, hey, that looks like something we could do. It was something we'd already talked about, but it more just gave us, it helped us flesh out the idea a little more. And I think the big thing for us, the motivating factor was, after TI2, we kind of looked at what TI2 did as far as production. We're like, this is great. Like, even why can't day-to-day online content have better production value? I mean, I don't mean to start ripping into other people creating Dota. We were just, all our Dota 2 content around the time of TI2 before and after was just produced from our bedrooms or our office using XSplit. Toby was the only one with a studio at Joint Dota, but that wasn't even really a studio, so to speak. He was using XSplit. They didn't have a camera shot. It was essentially exactly the same thing everyone else was doing with just an XSplit stream, even though he was in a studio. So we definitely felt there was a lack of quality Dota 2 content. That was where GD Studio were the first ones to come into Dota 2 and make proper studio content. They had one or two small, just one weekend $2,000 cups or something, and people were like, oh, this is what real esports content looks like. And that was where we were like, that's where we kind of said we should be doing this on a week-to-week basis. And we talked about the studio. We came up with the fact that we could actually do this. And after TI2, we just sort of, I think most of our focus and all our talks together were about making a studio happen.
Did you guys talk about what might have happened if it didn't pan out? If the Indiegogo crowdsourcing didn't reach, let's say it reached 10,000, did you guys have a conversation about what was going to happen? What were you guys going to end up doing at that point?
At least for I believe at the time our plan was basically, if we do this, we can go for a studio like now or in the next few months. If it doesn't work, we still want to do it. We're still going to do everything in our power to make it happen, but we'll wait until we have enough funds to buy all the initial equipment that's required to have a proper production. Because what we didn't want to do was say that we're doing a studio, but not have the money to actually make something good, because that first impression is really important, right? So heading into the International 3 Eastern Qualifiers, which was our first big studio production, we were, I mean, at least for me, I was pretty nervous, and we also just weren't sleeping, because I would say we probably worked, each of us, like a few hundred hours over the weeks leading into it, just to make sure that everything that was possible, from video content to just the camera shots, the tech setup, the overlay system, the finding a proper producer, getting all the audio stuff configured, like everything that went into the show, either myself or GoDz was working on, and I was not sleeping easy. I think GoDz in general is a little more relaxed and low-key than me, but yeah, we wanted to do it eventually, but we wanted to do it right. And I don't think we've done it perfectly, but I'm pretty proud of what we've done, and I feel like it's a good launching point for what we're capable of in the coming months and years.
How much of the planning for the studio, in terms of spend or just everything that you were going to need, were hashed out even before the Indiegogo?
You mean as far as how the money would be spent, or where the money would come?
How the money is spent, or just in general, a plan to put together a studio. Like, did you already have an idea it would be? I think you did have an idea of being in LA, right? I think it's on the Indiegogo there, but I'm just kind of curious as to like how much of the planning actually took place after you guys saw the amount of money that you guys got from the Indiegogo.
Like, did plans change too?
Yeah, definitely some things changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, which was we didn't have beforehand, we didn't have an entire blueprint for what the studio will look like. We didn't have a list of equipment. That sort of came after we'd at least started the Indiegogo. The way it worked is we actually funded it in we reached our goal in 30 hours. We didn't actually get the money until the end. The entire Kickstarter lasted a month, so we had a full month to say, hey, what do we... like, how are we actually going to make a studio now? We're guaranteed our goal, but we've got a month before we can even start spending money to buy equipment. It was really this thing where this sort of led to just giving us this extra time, this breathing room, and this just sense of calm that we'd actually done it and we're capable of doing it all. So it was definitely I guess interesting and nice. Now we had a bunch of support, of course. I mean, I mentioned the GoDz studio helping out as far as giving us a lot of advice. Twitch TV, I mean, they've supported us a ton over the last. Back from the very first tournament Beyond the Summit, organized back in start of 2012. So it really was. I guess to answer your question, things did change a lot, and the way we've always worked is that we listen to the community a lot. We just sort of do. We're very community driven and community built.
Yeah, and I mean, to sort of echo what he's saying, I don't think we'd figured out every detail, because even though we tried and we put together a technical diagram, right, of every single piece of equipment, what the equipment is, you check the specs to make sure, because GoDz worked more on sort of the business side and generally does, and the marketing and connecting to sponsors and tournament organizers, things like that. I'm by no means a technical wizard. Well, at least not when it comes to production stuff. If you haven't worked in it specifically, you have no idea what you're doing. I still don't have much of an idea, but you look at all the equipment and you see how it's supposed to work together, and you think it's going to work, and then you Google it and you try and triple check. You talk to people who know what they're talking about, or you hope they do, and you get a lot of feedback. And that's really where Trance, we mentioned the GoDz studio, and James has given us a lot of sort of wisdom as far as, he's been in esports much longer than us. His general business sense is great as far as like how to construct the business and work with people, and we appreciate that a lot. But as far as like direct, how did we get put the studio together? We came up with myself mostly came up with what we thought was like the best possible technical setup, and I showed it to Trance, and he's like, well, you have a problem, LD. You need to rip it all up and change it. Actually, some of the stuff we wanted to do, we stuck with, but there was we got a lot of bad advice as well, which fortunately Trance helped us kind of cut through that and eliminate it, and avoid making a lot of costly mistakes. But yeah, overall, production knowledge is in short supply, high demand, not just for us, but for anyone in esports or just any kind of broadcast. And yeah, we had a lot of help.
Yeah, Christian's awesome. We had Christian on here not too long ago too, talking about production, so that was really, really great. The man behind the GoDz series.
That was a very entertaining show.
Oh, yeah. Well, who was it? It was Christian, Elliott, and Scoots, right? Yeah, those three. Yeah. Yeah, definitely putting those three together. Putting Scoots and Christian together for sure. It's interesting.
That was really good. Good. There was some good EU-NA rivalry going on.
Oh, yeah, definitely. A lot of old guy and young guy rivalry. Yeah. But, okay, so why don't we sneak in some WCS TI talk really quickly, John, because I wanted to hear your, get your thoughts on this too. All right, so big talk, at least in the StarCraft community last week or so, has been the scheduling of the WCS regional finals. A, basically all on the same time, just all three of them, and then B, the same weekend as TI3. I want to get your thoughts, and I said a lot on Unfiltered, so I think some of the folks that watch Unfiltered kind of know how I feel about it, but I'll kind of rehash some of it later. But I want to see what you guys think first. We'll start with you, John.
What do I think about scheduling? It's ridiculous. I'm actually baffled by it. It's just stupid. I actually just don't get it. Like, what were they thinking? I guess. Yeah, I mean, that's all I can say. I'm just so baffled. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, a lot of it I know has to do with the end goal of the Season 2 finals being at Gamescom. That was like the thing I think that was motivating. And I'm not sure if ESL's hosting it. Like the partners all take turns, right, for the actual season finals. And I know ESL is doing it this time around. So the Gamescom final is in I forget how many weeks, but it's like 3 or 4 weeks later, right? So they had to get the regional finals in before then, and I think that's why a lot of them ended up being scheduled, in a week and a half, just during the same weekend as TI3. So I think that's kind of the reasoning behind it. Whether it was
it's not even that is the biggest issue as it is. Why would they schedule all the regionals at the same time? That to me, that's just it's ridiculous.
So obviously the StarCraft community's reacted. We've heard from TV and we've heard from lots of other people. But I want to kind of hear from GoDz and LD. Have the Dota 2 community even even really batted an eye to any of this, because no matter what the percentage of viewership or just the strength of the viewership will be on each side of it, it's going to take away, it's going to cannibalize each other in some way, even if it is like a small percentage one way or the other, right? So has the Dota 2 community talked about it that much at all, or no?
I think for the most part, the Dota 2 community just doesn't give a shit. They're just like, well, Blizzard I mean, if anything, it makes them feel happy about themselves because Blizzard screwed up so monumentally, and all the Dota 2 fans are thinking like, well, Valve know what they're doing, and Valve have organized this fantastic event. Whereas if you look at these other esports, they're just screwing things up, which is where the Dota 2 community are like, well, we've got everything here running smoothly. Sure, it's going to clash. Maybe there's going to be slightly less viewership as far as the TI goes, but I think in general, Dota fans are they're just going to watch it for the great Dota. I mean, they're not going to be worried about missing some WCS regional tournament. I think there is a lot of crossover as far as people who watch and follow Dota 2 and people who watch and follow StarCraft 2, but I think the majority of them will end up choosing Dota 2 unless they're a predominantly StarCraft person. Then maybe they'll just sort of watch the TI here and there just to see what's going on as far as an esports event. But I mean, Dota 2 community is just very, very blasé about it. I mean, they're happy to. I mean, it's like any gaming community. They're happy to sort of poke fun at another community when they screw up. I mean, they take a look on the Reddit and you'll see daily flaming of League of Legends. So Blizzard and StarCraft 2 do something like this, and they get some flack, which is unfortunate because the Dota 2 community gets along with the StarCraft 2 community.
And
it's one of those things where they work together a lot.
There's a lot of crossover between the two communities, and I know a lot of people that love to watch StarCraft 2, and they play Dota 2 now, so they're obviously watching both, and this is going to be an issue for them, right? I mean, you can run 2 streams at the same time, but let's be real, like you can't really focus on anything like when you're doing that. So that's why it's been more mind-boggling. I don't think it would have been nearly as bad if it was a huge League of Legends tournament with WCS. So the fact that the Dota 2 community doesn't really care is it mostly just because Dota 2 in this situation seems to be the big dog, just kind of the big dog in the room versus the.
Well, I think it's the tournament that's the big dog.
Yeah, I mean the tournament. It doesn't matter. That's what I meant. The tournament's the big dog in the room versus the WCS right now.
Yeah, I think a part of it's that, and it's also, if it's like if somebody else is having problems, but your life's amazing, and you don't care about that person too much, or, they're not as important to you as your life, then you're like, I'm doing great. Sorry about your problems, but that ain't gonna wipe the smile off my face. So I think with Dota 2, everyone's just so excited for the international. Yeah. They're so excited for the bigger prize pool. They're enthralled by, can Navi repeat? They're on the rise. Can they get back the swag from TI1? There's all these storylines and just these teams that people love and care about that, it's like there's only just like you can only pay so much attention to one stream, there's only so much space in your emotional head to care about anything negative when you've got all this awesome stuff that you're excited about. So I think a lot of it's just positive energy towards TI3 as opposed to like, oh, we're better than them. StarCraft sucks.
Yeah, so I guess we should ask the question then, like, should the StarCraft community be taking the same approach? Just being happy about WCS happening that weekend and
no, because I think it goes to what John said. You have 3 regional finals all in one weekend. Who is going to watch all of that? That is not possible unless you put your body in physical danger. Like, and even if you watch most of it, you're probably, it's meant to be enjoyed. It's like a fine wine. If you watch 24 hours of tournament content, come on, that's not as good as like 6 hours here. It's great. Take a break, come back refreshed. You get to enjoy it. So
yeah,
I think because StarCraft is competing with itself, that's unfortunate. And then there's the separate issue of what's best for like growing the game of StarCraft or sustaining it. And I think some people care about that. But if I was like a true StarCraft fan, and I definitely like StarCraft, it's not my game, but I love watching it. Mm-hmm. I think I'd be most upset that I can't enjoy the whole event. I can't watch all the regional finals. I have to pick.
Yeah, John, you were gonna say something?
No, I was just he was so right on about just whether it's the right way to grow the to grow StarCraft 2, and it's not. So I was just commenting. I was just making faces. I think agreeing with him. That's good stuff. I
think Total Biscuits made a lot of good points there about how like it's kind of suicide for, making the game look as big and as attractive as possible to sponsors, but I guess I view that as a separate issue from just like what the fans care about, which is can I get to watch all the players and all the games?
Yeah, no, I agree, because like you said, they're going to be cannibalizing themselves, because it could run 24 hours, but the scheduling is going to overlap with some of the, like, 2 of the regions probably at a time, just given the time, just the time frames or whatever. So,
right.
Yeah, that's going to be terrible. And, yeah, TB, if you guys didn't catch TB's content patch, watch that. He makes some really good points, and he does it so eloquently. So so definitely watch that, because he makes a lot of good points about just the sponsors. And, there's whenever you put yourself right up next to another game, and we have sponsors who are, there's obviously, we have some sponsors that cover a lot of games, right? But we have some sponsors that are only want to pick one game to really commit to at this point. And if you put them side by side, direct comparison, it's it's not going to bode well for the game that doesn't do as well. So that's a big issue, I think. But again, it's a regional finals. It's not the season finals. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
That's the one thing that you can maybe look at it from a just not silver lining, but just something that, or just a reason that they would do that. But still, it's not a very efficient way to do it.
There's no good reason why they should have done that, Chris.
I'm trying to think of something, okay? I'm trying to throw out
There's
something.
nothing.
It's his job to play devil's advocate, but I mean, you cannot enjoy Blizzard and the way that they've treated the community, developed the game. Blizzard's obviously, they have an amazing track record, but let's just say it's been going the wrong direction. Valve has definitely made mistakes. They made a lot of mistakes, especially with Counter-Strike, and I personally, to this day, have a lot of issues with how they tried to basically push Counter-Strike Source when it was a crappy game compared to 1.6, just flat out a worse competitive title. I still have some issues with that personally as someone who grew up playing the game, but I mean, Blizzard is going down that same route right now where they've just consistently disappointed the community. They're not giving them what they want. Obviously, they have a different situation now, being owned by Activision, having, I guess, the pressures of the board and the bottom line more to worry about, whereas Valve, at least it seems, has the luxury of just doing whatever is best for the community, whatever they want. But if, as a StarCraft fan and someone who's seen what Blizzard has done in the past, it's a shadow of what they're capable of. So I'm personally disappointed. I wanted to watch the regional finals. I was really excited for it, but I'll be casting TI3, so it's not going to happen.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be kind of similar. I'm sure I'm going to be having a lot of windows open, but I'm not going to be able to watch all of it. And even TI3, I'm not going to be able to watch all of TI3 either, because of because there's going to be finals, of WCS or semifinals or whatever happening during I don't know what moments of TI3, so you
can't really enjoy it that way either. Yeah. I understand with it. MLG tried that with like having, was it 15 different streams going at once?
Multicaster.
Like,
right, all of them enjoy none.
Yeah, exactly. You barely get to see all of them anyway. So and again, so why run all 3 regionals at one day? That's the first mistake. And then why, put it up against one of the largest esports tournaments of the year every year. So it's just dumb.
The one thing with the international is it does go for 5 days this year. So it's one of those things, as maybe as predominantly StarCraft 2 viewer, I don't think many of those viewers are planning to watch the international all 5 days, unless they're really into Dota 2, which quite a few StarCraft 2 players may be. So I think it's something where the international goes long enough that you could still catch bits and pieces throughout the first few days, and then tune in again for the last day, for the finals, for the semifinals. We'll lose a bracket final since it's double elimination, and I think that does sort of. I think it's not as big a problem as people think.
Yeah. Okay, well, John, I know you got to get going, so
I apologize.
We'll
guys.
take a quick break once once he kind of rings out here. But you want to do some quick shout outs or anything like that?
Actually, I won't be on the show next week because I will be at QuakeCon in Dallas, Texas. And for a lot of people probably watching the show, they're not familiar with what QuakeCon is, but Quake is the granddaddy, sorry LD, of esports, even over CS.
I can accept that.
And okay. And we're actually going to be running some Dota 2 tournaments. I had a chance to meet with some of the Valve guys last year, so hopefully I'll be able to meet with them again this year. And we're going to be we're gonna be running some Dota 2 tournaments, and some League of Legends, and some StarCraft 2 tournaments. So we're running the full gambit.
When you say tournaments there, just so people that have never been to QuakeCon, like what do you mean by running tournaments there?
So QuakeCon is the second largest LAN party in the world, next to DreamHack, and basically it's a huge LAN, 3,500 people, and my team is set up in the BYOC with a huge booth area. We're actually partnering with Razer this year, and there's my little plug to Razer, and along with like help from Twitch and whatnot, and ID software allows us to actually run tournaments where people use our website or they come directly up to the booth, and we run tournaments for the 3,500 people that are at the event. Sometimes we run some online / live event type things. We set up a little mini stage. We bring people up on stage for the finals, and we project it. Give these guys that are really just coming to play video games an opportunity to kind of feel like they're at the international, right? They made it. And but really they just got up from their, they haven't slept for 2 straight days, and they just got up from their desk and walked over and played at the booth. But it should be good times. QuakeCon is like no other event. It's I tell people this before, but it is like no other event in the U.S. or I think anywhere actually. So it should be good. We should have a good time. I'll try to let you guys know when we're running some Dota 2 stuff, and you let us know how our production value is from a very dark and dingy, huge warehouse room. So
you're building the hype really well, John.
I am. Again, it's not like anything you've ever been to, so it's so hard to explain.
Well, John, before you go, I just want to say, Quake may be the granddaddy, but granddaddy's got a bum leg. He's got Alzheimer's. He's pooping in a diaper right now.
You know what? You know as well as anyone, how long have they said that about Quake? How long have they said it about CS? And it's still there. So,
to be fair,
it's still there.
In my heart, Counter-Strike's dead because 1.6 is dead, and I like Global Offensive, but I can't get fully behind it. So,
not the only one, man. You're not the only one.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Exactly.
Too bad we're sitting on there for this.
It was a good talk, and you guys definitely have something going. And regardless of what Richard might say about crowdsourcing, I think what you guys did was ballsy. And I think it's basically you're asking the community to support what you guys do well, and you know what? If they didn't support you, they wouldn't. They didn't believe in you, and obviously they did. So that's great. And I wish you guys the best of luck. Thanks, Chris. Sorry I got to leave early, guys. I apologize, but good stuff.
All right, thanks, John. So we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about the International 3, and then we'll start taking your questions. And we're gonna have you guys call in, or you can type them in the chat. But we'll be right back, guys.